That's it. That's so awesome. Oh, they're too perfect. These are too perfect. Hey everyone, my name is Dan Shimolinski. People like to call me Chimy, and you can too. I am a bassist, sound designer, and composer living in Los Angeles, and we are back checking out an addition to the Hybrid Cinema series. This is Uppers and Risers. When I think about music, arguably more important than the melodic material itself is how you get there. What is the cartilage, the breath, the bridge from one idea to another? How do you get your viewer to have a instant mood change without it necessarily feeling jarring or sudden? I would argue the answer to that question is an upper, is a riser. It's the breath, the ambient air to any cinematic score that really helps build up a situation so that it makes your metaphorical drop that much more intense. Like so many other trends in modern cinematic scoring, Uppers and Risers borrows directly from the world of electronic music, dance music, techno music, dubstep. You will find some element of rise right before the epic drop. And Uppers and Risers is packed to the gills with source material for that. We've got drum risers, orchestral risers, synth risers, and they're all super, super effective. We're gonna take a look at the parts that you get with Uppers and Risers, head over to the program section to see it in action, and yes, we will be making something from scratch. So let's get to it. Now, I may have glossed over what a riser actually is. Whether you realize it or not, you have heard it in some capacity. It is the big build-up before the drop, the big anticipatory musical gesture that set up your big event. And in Uppers and Risers, you get 12 parts to make that happen. I want to actually start with this part called short risers. These to me are the most traditional kind of very airy, very synthetic sounding risers, and ones that you've definitely heard before. All right, so if I were to hold down all of these, we would be here all day. But you get the picture. A varied range of sonic possibilities, very different timbres, very different approaches to the concept of a riser. I talked about this a bit in Downers and Falls, which I consider to be the opposite of this library. You can rise in pitch, you can rise in speed, you can rise in amount of timbral stuff that's happening. How many layers are in there and how many layers are coming in. So just a huge variety there. Hopefully that gives you a good starter palette to what this library is. And now we can start at the top and go through some other parts. So we've got some drum risers. Now these are kind of big epic roll kind of sounds. You get long ones, you get short ones. Let's check out a few long ones. super effective. So a great example of how you can have some really low rumbly information kind of still achieve the upper effect. I love waiting for those to come in sometimes. I mean, obviously you can place it in your project to make it perfectly timed to whatever you're doing. Use offset and envelopes to kind of end up in the middle of a sample if you want, or just go to your short part. I mean, these are definitely shorter and more to the point. But equally as impactful. That's heavy. So you can definitely hear that there is some treatment, some reverb, some delay stuff happening already baked into the sample. Personally, I like that kind of thing. I know a lot of people like to start with just dry samples and then do all their own processing. But a ton of thought has been put into every single individual one of these risers, including the intended treatment. So I am all for it. Helps you make music faster. We can take a peek at this part, which is called long risers, kind of the opposite of short risers, a mixed bag of source material and approaches to the riser effect, just longer. I'm just gonna play a couple seconds of these. I mean, you could get the picture. They go on for a really long time. Oh, that's a crazy one. Did you hear like the little hiccup in the beginning? Very cool. Classic. The string is tightening, the suspense is building. You just feel such power, such in control of just like, yes, I'm building. If you know anything about the way that I program, I love just like single key effects, just like one depression of the key and boom, you're already moving. To me, those source materials sound a little more complex than short risers, I guess because they're longer, you have more time, more development. It sounds a little more like industrial to me, more varied source material. And then speaking of source material, you've got orchestral risers, arguably the first type of cinematic riser. How many scores have you heard just long, juicy string slides? I mean, that's been happening for decades. So a lot of acoustic source material in these. I will play a few of them for you now. Man, I love that one because it's not only just the pitch. It's not just the pitch. There's other stuff happening. The actual volume is increasing. You're getting more burbles and artifacts, more distortion. It's an incredibly emotional library. That's my favorite, where things are rising, things are changing, but there's a constant pulse. You could build a whole thing around that. Let's check out some short ones. Woohoo! Brass. Strings. Oh, they're too perfect. These are too perfect. I've used the phrase score in a box before. This really, I mean, is unbelievable. Yeah. And then we have some time-based ones here. We've got 1 bar, 2 bar, 4 bar, 8 bar. Personally, I don't know what tempo or division of tempo these are all in, but if you just think about them as short, longer, long, longest, that's great too. Again, some varied source material here. Let's check out some 1 bar risers. Super, super fun. And 2 bars, so double that length. Just time out for 1 second. Do you realize how, like, the sound designer in me is thinking about how I would go about creating that sound from scratch. There's so many layers there, and there's so much thought put into the frequency separation, the stereo imaging. And that's 1 note of 1 part. Always good to just do a check-in on the effort and the time it would create for you to have to do this from scratch. Some harsh resonance there. Love these. Then 4 bar. I love that contrary motion at the beginning. And then it zaps back. That's the only 4 bar one I'm showing you. That one is the best. They're kind of like mini compositions, right? Like mini sculptures that you can just integrate into whatever you're trying to do. And then the big boys, we got some 8 bar ones. I mean, that seemed a little longer than 8 bars, but, you know, whatever. Who's counting? source material, ranges, filtering, treatment. I mean, the differences are huge. Just so much within each part. I mean, this is absolutely a bang for your buck library. Again, just reflecting on if you told me I had to create something of this magnitude from scratch. No way. We looked at short risers, so let's head to these guys, which, you know, I'm biased. I like a lot because it's synthy. Synth risers, probably the most ubiquitous type of risers. You hear it in pop music, dance, EDM, and film scores, and these are kind of tailored to that cinematic sound, although nothing is stopping you from using these in any of your electronic music productions. Or acoustic, or anything. I mean, get creative. Sir, that's a car? No, but all jokes aside, you can definitely start to pick out some specific synth elements, lots of hard sync action happening there, FM. That's clearly a big beefy square wave going through some kind of distortion. And here are some short ones. Okay, again, sounds like a car to me, but... That's the vibe. That kind of spooling up effect, that big kind of maybe sine wave meets square wave. Totally awesome. Such a variety. I mean, they have covered all the bases here. So what do you say we pop over to the program section to see this stuff in action, and you get a lot. 70, I believe, if that's a correct count. I'm responsible for about 20 of these, and I'll just go ahead and say it. The variety of sounds that exist within this program section really paints the picture of how varied of a library this is. As I was going through these earlier, there's not a whole lot of crossover, and they are all badass, so let's jump in. Let's start at the top with Atlantic. I love that so much. Now, a couple things you're going to notice just that are common among these programs. You're going to notice a lot of one-note same, you're going to notice a lot of one-note stretch, and you're going to typically notice volume and filtering controls to the mod wheel. Like, for example, the mod wheel is all the way up right now, and if I just started this riser, that's a very different sound than having it filtered down and opening with the crescendo. Right? And also, if you do one note stretch, there's a time aspect to where you're playing on the keyboard. So if you want it to be nice, quippy, and short, maybe you play up there. But if you want it to be longer and really more drawn out, you can play it lower. MelloT, MelloD. To me, it sounded kind of like a Mellotron, but I just grabbed, I think, maybe a string and brass sound from both and then did some chords here. Mod wheel to the release, so you can actually hear more of the bending at the end, right? Because I kind of, I tried to truncate it a little bit so that you wouldn't get a bend aspect from just a single note. Right? But if you move up that release, there's a little bit, right? So that can actually be really fun to play. Okay, enough of the auxiliary stuff. Let's get back to some actual risers. This one's called Behind the Mask. Yeah, so these are all very, very stackable. The trickiest part is definitely having them end at the exact same place. You can compensate for that in a couple different ways, as this sound designer did using pitch, because that also equates to speed. But as you'll see when we start making stuff from scratch, the goal is to kind of have it end right at the end, because a riser kind of loses its effect if it goes up, 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 and then it kind of, I don't know. Tried to do that here a bit with one of my programs called Bit of Rise, utilizing the bit brush. And I personally enjoy a hard cutoff going into a reverb. I think that's a huge part of the riser sound. So on a lot of my programs, you'll see I have the release set to nothing. So when you pull your finger off that key, that's where it ends. Not too much going on in the mod matrix. I have a bandpass filter, center frequency and distortion mapped to it. And I think that's a really, really useful one to use. It's interesting how you can change the genre and the vibe of your riser just by using a simple tone coloring thing like BitBrush, for example. That's a completely different sound, a completely different type of riser than, say, if we were to take it off. We go from like the techie and hackers behind a computer to like the desert almost, right? Here's one I did called Brass Phase, and doing a lot of stuff with the micro pitch here. I have this layer detuned a bit. I have an LFO going to the pitch of my second one. I'll let you check out the mod matrix for yourself. We've got some EQ stuff happening, but just try to do a really, really slow grow. I mean, you'll see like the fourth and third part here, which are kind of the lower end information I have coming in later. That's a really nice effect to start up with something kind of high and then slowly fade in your lows. A riser, I think by character, by default, is a higher sound. So it's really effective to have that lift and that upper support from your lower frequency range. Makes me laugh at the end. It's a little bit of a, out of context, it sounds a little corny, but that would totally kill in the right kind of score. Used chorus a lot. I think anytime you get these detuning and phasing sounds, it just kind of leans into the riser thing. Here's one I did called Chorus Revver, and basically just chose two short risers and tried to have a ramp LFO going to a filter. And then when I raise the mod wheel, it increases the frequency of that LFO. So you're getting kind of a speeding up, a spooling up effect. And also the volume of part 2 is coming up, so it gets louder. You've got that kind of, look at filters going crazy. And another situation where I raised the pitch of one of them so that the cutoff would be kind of in the same area. This one's kind of cool. It's called Computer Battlefield, and not really sure what's going on here. It's obviously an ARP, but definitely utilizing the grain reverb to give kind of a Battlefield-like sound from these drum risers. It's pretty neat. So the grain reverb is giving that kind of stutter, almost machine gun effect. A very, very slow ARP, so it's picking out key frequencies. It almost sounds random, but obviously it's a 16-step sequence. But it's slow enough that it works. This one's called Dark Souls, and it gets pretty shrieky. Sorry to my headphone users, I'll leave it at that. But oh, isn't that just perfect? I mean, that is a perfect synth riser sound. Analog distortion, delay, scatter. I found myself using all kinds of delays. The scatter delay, bucket brigade delay. I also use the grain reverb. I mean, this stuff is just ripe for processing. Very cool. Here's one I did called Flute Pusher because it does utilize kind of a fluty part from the orchestral long risers. And I think it's pretty effective. You can check out the mod matrix here and see what's going on. We're doing my similar little frequency trick on the LFO, which is going to part 4's volume. Also threw on a gate, which I have not used yet. I actually find it very interesting that modern scoring seems to be kind of going more towards the gated approach to risers, to climactic music. There's kind of that like like that stutter effect. That's kind of what I was going for with this very simple gate here. This is the most anticlimactic demo I have ever done. I apologize. You're just gonna be revved up and no release. Maybe at the end I'll just like do one giant bass drum to bookend this. But yeah, 4 parts here. So this stuff is totally stackable. I mean, you know, the more the merrier in terms of your elements, the more complexity you have, the more stereo motion you can get, the more LFOs you can use, the better. This one's called Guilt, and it is using 1-note stretch, so you can kind of set the speed and the intensity based on where you play this one on the key bed. Or then I did a handful of tongue-in-cheek programs here because if you've watched any amount of reality TV show, you know that there's just like tons of like cymbal wash and like bowed cymbal effects, and like I did 2 here that I thought made me chuckle. This one's called Made for TV, and it is a swipe kind of sound utilizing just all fast little just transitional material sounds from these various parts. Right? You can just picture like someone just said something real juicy and the camera turns and zooms in. So I had a little fun there. And then I did kind of a reality TV role, very stereotypical drum reveal moment. Oh. Is that so? Then I did a long one called Mod Decimator, I believe. Decimates, Mod Decimates. Because the mod wheel kind of does decimate the stereo field, at least, of this riser. I'm going to play it for you without the mod wheel, and then I'll show you what I did. That filter opening up sound, by the way, comes from this ladder filter utilizing the ADSR of the cutoff filter. So don't forget, you can shape your cutoff filtering with one push of the key. You don't need to necessarily assign it to mod wheel and, you know, work it up like I have been. Just a good reminder to use every aspect of your filters, including the ADSR. But now for the decimation, check this guy out. So I have it bring up some distortion in my ladder filter, some life in my ladder filter, some analog in my filter, which just kind of gives a little uncertainty to the opening of it. And then I've got this LFO, which is a random LFO, very, very fast, set to range left here for part 1 and range right for part 2. So the stereo image is just gonna get really, really chopped up. I'll open up the panning of part 1 so you can see what it looks like, but part 2, it's just the opposite side. So just randomly placing it everywhere in your stereo field. I really like stuff like that. This one's called Total Terror and utilizes a very, very slow arp here and some shimmer reverb. This totally paints an underscore, which to me, like, you could totally have this running and slowly automate your volume up so that it's this kind of long, but still a little more stagnant riser. Really enjoy this one. So it's just like little tiny pushes, little micro risers within something. I mean, you could totally have like your mod wheel mapped to dynamic. I didn't even touch the mod wheel. Is that where it is? No, it's going to cut off and stuff. Cool. That's also useful. But you could have like the volume slowly start to creep up and all these little hits act as like mini risers. And then I will finish with probably, I would say, in terms of modern cinema, the most quoted riser. I mean, people love to talk about this sound, and it comes from the Batman movies, Hans Zimmer. I called this one Why So Serious. I believe that the tale goes that the recording was a single cello just doing the longest possible glide up or something like that, but there's more going on, and I think a huge aspect of it is having maybe 2 layers and detuning it so that it's just this super long effective single line but kind of deviating as you're rising sound. So I've chosen 3 one-note stretches here from long risers, all kinds of string sounds. I've got a bandpass filter just kind of massaging the cutoff with a little bit of resonance, compressor, shimmer reverb, and here's what my mod matrix looks like. I think it's pretty cool. So you can really let it go and go and go. And it is a one-note stretch, so if you want to start higher, have it evolve faster, you can. Not quite the sound, but definitely within that same vein, enough to name it Why So Serious. So that's a quick rundown of a few of the programs that you get with uppers and risers. And now let's go ahead and make something from scratch. Now, I cannot emphasize this enough. I found the highest rate of success when designing programs for this library was to go through and find a sound that inspired me and go from there. So in other words, going with some broad ideas, but really let the library inspire you. So what do I want to create? I want to create a simple riser that has multiple layers that kind of come in at different times. So using samples that aren't too crazy, doesn't have too much going on, I'd like to create that myself. So going for simple sounds, multiple layers, I'd love to have it start high and then have a lower one kind of slowly come in. And I'd like the length to be maybe what I would equate this like 2 to 4 bar region here. So let's see if we can find something. I actually want it to be a little bit longer, so let's hop over to the 4 bar part. Yeah, so like those wind sounds, those are always great. And oh, I have to decide whether I'm gonna do one note stretch or one note same. One note same. Just a great baseline riser from the start. Let's keep searching. That's gonna be more wind, so we don't need that. I like that because it's a completely different frequency range than part 1. And they totally complement each other. So we're gonna go one note same, and let's go ahead and hear where those end up. Do they end together? Pretty much. This the second one kind of takes off, but it's a lesser dynamic. The volume effect has already happened. I think that's going to be, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's going to be, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe we'll find out, an advantage of using parts within the kind of 4-bar, 2-bar, 1-bar is I think the timings are pretty similar. Yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes you have to mess with the volumes to really hear where one ends and where one starts. I think that's close enough for me. We could throw a delay on there as well that'll kind of mask the ending, but I really like that. Next, I'm hearing one of those like woo 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 woo, almost like synthetic machinery kind of sounding ones. I forgot where those were. Maybe they were just straight up in long risers. Let's take a peek. Maybe short risers. That's kind of the sound. So yes, one note same, but I want it to be much, much lower. So I'm going to drop the pitch to kind of match the timing of part 1. Interesting. It's longer than part 1. Maybe it could just be a case where I pull my finger off the key because I do want it lower. I have an idea. Envelopes. I would love it if that third part came in real slow, and then we'll have a 0 decay to basically a 0 sustain point. It's gonna need to be long. It's just a touch too long actually now. And let's lower the volume of part 1 so we can hear what's going on. Pretty close. Was that too short? You do need to volume compensate when you're doing trickery like this because it's going to start softer, right? That's the sound. Now, wouldn't it be cool if we had maybe some kind of LFO going to the panning that we could engage later in the sample that kind of matches that? You're never going to get it quite right, the timing, but we can try. Change our bias to center, and let's rein this in 60%. A little faster. A little faster. It's going to add some motion. That'll be cool. So we're going to go ahead and just assign that amount to mod wheel. And yay, we have our first automation. Let's bring back part 3 and go ahead and just get some levels here. Oh. I love that, but now part 2 is trailing a little too much. So, what do we do there? Let's go ahead and try the same trick. In fact, I'll even match the times and just see what happens. 7.321, 7.321. Doesn't need to be perfect, just in the ballpark. Whammo. Ooh. So the only thing trailing over is kind of that noise plume from part 1, which I do like. But now we can bring the volume up of part 2. Envelopes, baby. Use them. Oh, that's going so well. Now, it would be cool if we had some low-end information that we just bring in ourselves with the mod wheel. I'm going to go ahead and see what's in my long drum risers. That's kind of where that low-end stuff lives, and just see if we can find something that complements this riser soup that we're creating. I love that. But it does take its sweet time to kind of fade in. So I'm going to go one note same. And I'm going to try and tailor the timing to match, what are we using as a reference? I guess the parts with the crazy envelopes, right? Too late, buddy. So let's go ahead and start just a little bit more in. Close. I think it ended a little earlier now, so let's try a little further back. Man, it's so hard to hear. If I can't hear it, then I'm comfortable leaving that where it is. The other thing we can do is we can go ahead and just assign, because we know we're going to be on the mod wheel with this rise, so let's go ahead and have it maybe start, not at 0, but like 14. So now we've got two things going to the mod wheel, the craziness of that panning LFO and the volume of our lower rise. And of course it would be lovely if I turned on part 1. Yeah, let's hear 4 in isolation real quick. I just want to hear what kind of ending it has. Yeah, that's so much more impactful. I think it would be cool if we mixed around that, truthfully. See, like you can tell, okay, so this is finishing earlier, so we can even have the offset a little bit further back. This is the nitty gritty. This is the timing stuff that you just want to take the extra time to do. It's hard. There's so much happening. That's pretty right on. I'll leave it there. Yeah. That's just, this is awesome. I think it would be even cooler if we did, oh, I'm feeling adventurous. Let's do a ramp LFO on that volume of part 2. And it is going down. That's what I want. See that? Let's see. Ooh, wait, that's going to be even cooler. Let me just put it in isolation just to make sure I like it. Sweet, sweet. I like that. And that's a good ending speed, right? Totally, totally. Let's get everything going and see where we're at. That's it. That's so awesome. I almost forgot what part 1 is. Let's check that out real quick. Oh, right. The Windies. Let's just bring that tone control up a little bit. I feel like there's some low-end stuff that's colliding between part 1 and 4. And since these are kind of very much in the same ballpark, I might pan one just ever so slightly left and one ever so slightly right. And yes, I am breaking one of my cardinal sins of mixing, which is I typically like to have super bass frequency heavy stuff that's crucial to my sound in the center, but I'm just doing a touch of frequency separation here. Cool. Let's head over to effects. I do tend to put compressors on my risers because they are dynamic tools, but I feel like we're doing so much with envelopes kind of coming from a 0 point, such slow attacks, that you're going to want to compress that a little bit so that the initial aspect of the riser doesn't get lost, if that makes sense. Real generous attack, pretty low threshold, just a touch of gain here. Let's see. That's dope. Might be even a little too loud. Cool, sweet. And then let's just do some master filtering. I think that would be a pretty neat idea. I really like the modern analog for risers. I don't know why. And check this out. We can do this motion entirely with our ADSR. Do a one pole filter just because, why not? Doesn't open up quite as much as I'd like. That's good. I'd like it to open more though. Let's have the cutoff. I see how this works. Yeah, you don't get an EG amount per se. It's just gonna kind of attack at a set pace to your cutoff point or wherever you set your sustain, which is at 100%. So it's just giving us a little kiss of brightening. I'm going to do a 10% increase on the distortion of that filter. I don't personally feel the need to do a reverb or a delay at this point. I think it sounds kind of amazing as is. Let me just make sure I believe what I just said. Woo! And I like the quick pull off. I mean, you can actually, like, you can have the plume or the reverb or whatever was in the sample there. That works for me. Just gonna talk about some other things you could do. You could obviously EQ this to kind of perfectly sit in your mix. Right now, I would say there's a little bit of buildup kind of around this region here. Which is cool if you're going for like a lot of noise, but I typically, for risers, I typically do like a cut right around the 300 to 500 range, a little bit of a sub boost, just a touch. You can absolutely do a high shelf to kind of just boost your upper frequencies. That also works really, really nicely if you MIDI CC that so that it comes up with your mod wheel. That is too good. Too good for the speed at which we just created that. I even want more low end, and you know, we'll just do this here just to kind of compensate a little bit for the volume. I mean, we could grab our gain and just lower that like a sane person. And then sometimes it is good to just have a common reverb where everything's going. Yes, even the trails from your already treated parts. Just a touch, not a whole lot. I like plate for this with a lot of time, good amount of pre-delay. Don't really want to diffuse the input, but you can have a little bit of diffusion on the tail. Even less. Yeah, that works. So I present to you my very dynamic, medium ish riser we've created with 4 parts here, some very relatively light processing, and just a little bit of LFO action on our volume and panning of one of our parts. So here we go. One more time. Encore. That's really, really good. And there are, I believe, some specific keys in these parts that have this kind of complexity already baked in. So it really just kind of matters how much you want to control the situation. This is quite a bit of control and a super, super, super effective comprehensive riser. And we made it pretty quickly, I think. 22 minutes basically from start to finish making this. And yeah, I think that is a testament to just how well this stuff plays with each other. So uppers and risers, kind of the best, kind of the most comprehensive thing. I think if you're going for this kind of sound, complements downers and falls very beautifully and is a lovely addition to the Hybrid Cinema series. That's all I have for you today. Thanks so much for watching and I'll see you next time. This is Chimy signing out. Take care.